How old is that boy? Adrian Cole asked, and for the first time in 5 years, Ethan Hayes forgot how to breathe. The question should have been harmless. It was not. Across the ballroom, beneath chandeliers bright enough to turn every champagne glass into a shard of gold, 5-year-old Noah stood beside his twin brother with one hand wrapped around Mason Blake's fingers. Ethan had known this moment might come someday. He had imagined it in grocery stores, airport terminals, crowded sidewalks. Even in dreams, he woke from angry at himself for having. He had never imagined it here, at a charity gala packed with executives, cameras, and people who treated gossip like currency. Adrian stood less than 20 feet away, perfectly composed in a black tuxedo, except for the champagne glass frozen halfway to his mouth. 5 years had changed him in expensive ways. Sharper suit, colder posture, more silver at his temples, the same gray-blue eyes. Noah's gray-blue eyes. Ethan's stomach dropped. No, absolutely not. He had survived pregnancy, 2 newborns who apparently believed sleep was a government conspiracy, 3 apartment moves, 1 career change, and the terrifying experience of assembling twin cribs using instructions that seemed personally hostile. He could survive. Adrian Cole looking across a ballroom. Then Noah tilted his head. Adrian did the exact same thing. Ethan nearly laughed, because sometimes life had no sense of mercy and an excellent sense of timing. Beside him, Mason noticed the shift immediately. Of course he did. Mason always noticed. His hands settled lightly at the center of Ethan's back, familiar and steady. Not possessive, never possessive, just there. Adrian's gaze dropped to that hand, then lower, to Ethan's wedding ring. Something in his expression changed. Tiny, almost invisible. Ethan saw it anyway. He had once built an entire relationship around reading Adrian's smallest silences. Ethan, Adrian said. His name crossed the room softer than it had any right to. Ethan forced himself to smile. Adrian. Mason stepped beside him, calm as Sunday morning. Cole. Adrian barely looked at him. His attention had already returned to the boys. Liam was explaining something extremely serious about the dessert table while Noah studied Adrian with quiet curiosity. Then Adrian asked again, "How old is he?" Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Mason answered instead, "They're 5. Adrian blinked. They? Liam chose that exact moment to race over, nearly losing one dress shoe in the process. "Papa, Noah says I can't have 3 cupcakes, but I think that's not a real rule." Ethan caught him by the shoulders. "It is extremely real." Liam frowned, then noticed Adrian staring. "Who's that?" Silence spread between the adults, thin and dangerous in a room full of music. Adrian looked from Liam to Noah, then back to Ethan. The color slowly drained from his face. Ethan knew the exact second the math finished itself in Adrian's head. 5 years. Twins. Gray-blue eyes. Ethan's wedding ring. Mason standing where Adrian had once promised he would always stand. Adrian lowered his glass. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Ethan." This time it was not a greeting. It was a realization. And Ethan understood, with sudden terrifying clarity, that the past had finally found the address. Adrian waited until the orchestra shifted into another soft song before he spoke again. "We need to talk." Ethan almost laughed. 5 years of silence. And somehow Adrian still knew how to make a sentence sound like an order. "No, we do not." Liam had already returned to the dessert table under Mason's supervision, while Noah remained close enough to watch the adults with the solemn curiosity of a child who knew something strange was happening but had not yet decided whether it mattered. Adrian glanced toward him, then back at Ethan. "Please." That word stopped Ethan more effectively than any command could have. Adrian Cole did not say please. Not when negotiating billion-dollar contracts. Not when dealing with reporters. Not even when they had been young and foolish and convinced love could survive anything. Ethan looked at Mason. Mason gave the smallest nod, the kind that meant "I am here, but this is your choice." Ethan hated how much comfort fit inside one movement. 5 minutes, he said. They stepped into a quiet hallway. Beyond the ballroom, where the music became a muffled pulse behind closed doors. Adrian turned the moment they were alone. "They are mine." It was not a question. Ethan folded his arms. "Interesting." Adrian stared at him. "Interesting. You disappeared for 5 years, and your opening argument is biology." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I saw Noah. His name is Noah. I know that now. You know almost nothing now." The words landed harder than Ethan intended, but he did not take them back. Adrian looked toward the ballroom doors as though he could see through them. And Liam. Ethan said nothing. Adrian exhaled slowly. You knew? Ethan's expression went still. So did you. For the first time that night, Adrian looked genuinely confused. Not defensive. Not angry. Confused. What does that mean? Ethan studied him carefully. There it was. The question he had spent years imagining and had eventually stopped needing answered. It means I called you. Adrian frowned. When? After the appointment. Ethan could hear the old hospital hallway in his memory, smell burnt coffee from a vending machine, feel the cold plastic phone case against his palm. The doctor told me there were 2 heartbeats. I called you 3 times. Adrian's face changed. I never received those calls. Ethan gave a quiet, humorless laugh. Of course. Ethan, I am serious. So was I. Adrian stepped closer, then stopped himself, leaving several feet between them. Did you leave a message? Ethan looked directly into those gray-blue eyes. Yes. Silence. Adrian seemed to search his memory and find something there he did not like. What did you say? That there were 2 babies. Ethan swallowed. That I was scared. That I did not know what I was doing. That I needed you to call me back. Adrian looked away. For one strange second, he was not a chief executive officer, not a powerful alpha, not the man whose name appeared on buildings. He was simply someone standing inside the consequences of his own absence. I did not hear it, he said. Ethan's voice softened, but not with forgiveness. Maybe not then. Adrian looked back at him sharply. Ethan continued. But you knew I was pregnant before you left. Adrian's silence answered first. Ethan nodded once. That is what I thought. I thought I could fix everything and come back. You did not. I know. No. You know the sentence. You do not know the years. Ethan glanced toward the ballroom doors. You do not know midnight fevers. You do not know Noah hates peas but eats broccoli like it is candy. You do not know Liam sleeps with one sock on because apparently that is a reasonable life choice. Adrian's mouth almost moved, almost smiled, but the expression vanished. Mason knows. Ethan looked at him. Yes. Adrian lowered his voice. They call him Dad. Ethan felt something inside him settle. Because he was there when they needed one. Adrian stood very still. Then he asked the question Ethan had been waiting 5 years to hear. What do they know about me? Ethan held his gaze. Nothing yet. 5 years earlier, Ethan had believed the hardest part would be telling Adrian he was pregnant. He had been wrong. The hardest part was watching the man he loved turn a piece of paper into a business problem. Rain tapped softly against the windows of Adrian's penthouse while Ethan stood near the kitchen island, both hands wrapped around a mug of tea he had forgotten to drink. The test results rested between them. Adrian had read them twice. Then a third time. Say something, Ethan whispered. Adrian finally looked up. His face was controlled, almost too controlled. How far along? 7 weeks. Ethan tried to smile. The doctor says everything looks normal. Adrian nodded once. That was all. No laugh. No stunned happiness. No reaching across the counter. Just a nod. Ethan felt his chest tighten. You are scaring me. Adrian rubbed one hand over his face. My father called this morning. Ethan stared at him. What does your father have to do with this? Everything right now. Adrian turned toward the windows, where the city lights blurred behind the rain. The board votes next month. If I lose control of the company, my uncle takes over. Ethan waited. Adrian kept talking, and every sentence sounded like another door closing. My father knows about us. He has known for weeks. And he told me if I make this public, he will support my uncle. Ethan almost laughed because the alternative was crying, and he refused to do that yet. So your father does not like me. It is not that simple. It sounds painfully simple. Adrian turned back. He thinks the timing makes me vulnerable. I am not a weakness. I know. Do you? Silence filled the kitchen. Ethan looked down at the test results. 7 weeks. A tiny life. A future he had already started imagining without permission. Sunday mornings. A crib near the bedroom window. Adrian pretending not to be nervous while secretly reading every parenting book available. Foolish pictures. Beautiful pictures. What are you asking me to do? Ethan said. Adrian's voice lowered. Give me some time. Ethan looked at him for a long moment. How much? Adrian did not answer. A week. Ethan asked. A month? Until the vote? Until your father approves of me? Until I stop being inconvenient. Ethan. No. Tell me. Adrian stepped closer, but Ethan moved back before he could reach him. That hurt more than he expected. Adrian noticed. Of course he noticed. I love you, Adrian said. Ethan closed his eyes for half a second. That is not an answer. I can fix this. You keep saying that like I am asking you to repair a contract. That is not what I mean. Then what do you mean? Adrian looked at the papers again. I need to secure the company first. There it was. Not cruel. Not loud. Somehow worse because it was calm. Ethan nodded slowly. And then I come back. Come back from where? Adrian had no answer for that either. Ethan went to bed alone that night. Sometime before sunrise, he woke to the soft sound of the front door closing. Adrian's side of the bed was cold. On the kitchen counter sat a short note written in his careful handwriting. I need a little time. Please trust me. Ethan read it once. Then again. By the third time, the words had stopped meaning anything. He placed one hand over his stomach and stood in the quiet apartment while morning light slowly filled the room. Adrian had asked for time. Ethan did not know yet that 5 years were about to answer for him. 3 days after Adrian left, Ethan sat alone in a medical office staring at a black and white screen while a technician moved the wand carefully across his abdomen. He had expected 1 heartbeat. The room gave him 2. There, the technician said gently. And there. Ethan blinked. Wait. She smiled. You are having twins. For 1 second, the entire world became sound. 2 rapid heartbeats filled the small room, quick and steady, almost overlapping. Ethan laughed because the alternative was falling apart. Twins, he repeated. You are sure? Very sure. He stared at the screen until the shapes blurred. 2 babies. 2 tiny lives arriving at once. 2 reasons to be terrified. 2 reasons to keep going. He reached for his phone before he had even left the building. Adrian did not answer. Ethan called again from the elevator. Nothing. A third time from the lobby. Straight to voicemail. He stood near the automatic doors while cold November air swept inside every few seconds and finally listened to the tone. Adrian, it is me. His voice sounded smaller than he wanted. I just had another appointment. There are 2 babies. He stopped and pressed his lips together. Twins. I do not know if you are getting these messages, but I need you to know. I am scared. I am really scared, and I do not know what I am doing. People walked around him carrying coffee, folders, umbrellas, entire, ordinary lives. Ethan lowered his voice. Please call me back. He ended the message and stared at the screen. No miracle followed. No incoming call. No sudden explanation. Just his own reflection in the dark glass. Ethan. He looked up. Mason Blake stood about 10 feet away, holding a paper cup and wearing a charcoal overcoat dotted with rain. Ethan knew him mostly through Adrian. Mason was the founder of a growing technology company and, according to Adrian, an irritatingly calm competitor who smiled too much during negotiations. Ethan had met him twice at business dinners. This was not where either of them belonged. Mason glanced toward the clinic sign, then back at Ethan. My sister had an appointment upstairs. I was bringing her coffee. He studied Ethan for half a second, then wisely decided not to ask the obvious question. Are you all right? Ethan almost said yes. It was automatic, polite, useless. Instead, his face did something deeply inconvenient, and his eyes filled before he could stop them. I am fine, he said, which might have been more convincing if his voice had not cracked on the word fine. Mason looked at the phone in Ethan's hand. That sounds believable. Ethan gave a wet, surprised laugh. Please do not be nice to me right now. I think it might make things worse. Understood. Mason removed his coat and held it out. Then I am not being nice. I am preventing you from freezing because you apparently came outside without noticing it is 42 degrees. Ethan looked down. He was still wearing the thin sweater he had worn inside the clinic. Right. He accepted the coat. It was warm from Mason's body and smelled faintly like coffee and cedar. Nothing dramatic. Nothing dangerous. Just warm. They sat on a bench beneath the covered entrance while cars whispered across the wet pavement. Mason did not ask where Adrian was. He did not ask why Ethan was alone. He did not offer advice. 5 quiet minutes passed before Ethan finally said, There are 2. Mason turned slightly. 2. Ethan pressed both hands over his face, laughing again through tears. Babies. I am having twins. Mason was silent for a moment. Then he smiled, small and genuine. That sounds terrifying. Ethan lowered his hands. Thank you. Everyone keeps telling me it is wonderful. It can be wonderful and terrifying. Something in Ethan loosened. Exactly. Mason leaned back against the bench. Do you need a ride home? Ethan looked at his silent phone one more time. Adrian still had not called. Yes, he said. Mason stood without making the moment bigger than it was. Then let us get you home. Years later, Ethan would remember that as the first thing Mason ever gave him that Adrian could not. Not money. Not promises. Presents. Mason did not become part of Ethan's life all at once. He arrived in small, almost ridiculous increments. A grocery bag left outside Ethan's apartment because Mason claimed he had accidentally bought too much soup. A text before a doctor's appointment that simply said, "Do you need a ride?" A flat-packed crib carried into the living room with the confidence of a man who had clearly never assembled nursery furniture in his life. Ethan watched him spread screws, wooden panels, and an instruction booklet across the rug. "You run a technology company," Ethan said. "That is what people tell me. And yet you have been staring at step 4 for 12 minutes. Mason frowned at the diagram. Step 4 lacks integrity. Ethan laughed so suddenly that one of the babies kicked. He froze, one hand flying to his stomach. Mason immediately looked concerned. "Are you all right?" "Yes." Ethan smiled despite himself. One of them moved. Mason's expression softened. He did not reach out. He never assumed he was allowed to. Which one? Apparently the one who already hates furniture. Smart kid. The crib took 3 hours. One side ended up backward. Ethan laughed until his cheeks hurt. They fixed it the next morning. That became the rhythm of those months. Mason showed up. Not dramatically. Not with promises. He simply kept arriving. He sat in waiting rooms and pretended to read magazines while Ethan had appointments. He carried boxes when Ethan moved into a smaller apartment. He learned that Ethan could tolerate toast in the morning, but not eggs. He found a used rocking chair online because Ethan had admired one in a store and quietly put it back after seeing the price. "You cannot keep buying things," Ethan protested when Mason carried it inside. "I did not buy it." "Mason, technically I rescued it." "From where?" "A very aggressive grandmother in Connecticut." Ethan stared at him. Mason remained perfectly serious for 3 seconds before smiling. Ethan hated how easy it had become to smile back. The hardest days were the appointments Adrian should have attended. Ethan stopped calling after the 4th week. He stopped checking for messages sometime after that. But every time the ultrasound machine filled the room with 2 steady heartbeats, some foolish part of him still imagined the door opening. It never did. Mason was usually the one sitting beside him instead. During one appointment, Ethan caught him studying the monitor. With suspicious concentration. "You know you cannot actually tell which one is which from there, right?" Ethan whispered. Mason pointed carefully. "That one is Noah. I have not even decided on Noah. You mentioned it twice." Ethan blinked. "You remembered?" Mason looked confused by the question. Of course. That was the problem. Mason remembered everything Ethan had trained himself not to expect anyone to remember. By the 7th month, Ethan was tired constantly. His back hurt. His apartment looked like a small children's store had exploded inside it. One rainy Saturday, Mason arrived with paint samples for the nursery. Ethan stood in the doorway watching him tape shades of pale blue and soft green against the wall. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan asked. Mason glanced over. "Doing what?" "All of it." Ethan gestured helplessly toward the room. "The appointments. The furniture. The food. You are Adrian's rival. You barely knew me before this." Mason became very still. "Do you want me to stop?" "That is not what I asked." "I know." Ethan waited. Mason looked at the 2 unfinished cribs, then at Ethan. His voice was quiet when he answered. "Because someone should show up." Ethan felt the words settle somewhere deeper than he wanted them to. Mason returned to the paint samples as if he had said nothing important. But Ethan stood there with one hand resting over 2 moving heartbeats and understood that something in his life had already begun to change. By the time Noah and Liam were born, Mason knew which hospital vending machine had the least terrible coffee, which lullaby made Ethan stop worrying for 3 whole minutes, and exactly how many pillows it took to make a hospital chair almost comfortable. He never called himself family. He never asked Ethan for anything. He simply stayed. 5 years later, standing inside the ballroom with Adrian only a few yards away, Ethan understood how dangerous memory could be. It did not arrive in order. It came in flashes. Mason asleep beside a crib at 2 in the morning. Mason carrying 2 diaper bags because Ethan had forgotten which one held the bottles. Mason learning that Noah hated mashed potatoes but would eat anything shaped like a dinosaur. Mason letting Liam paint one fingernail bright blue because apparently that was the price of peace on a Sunday afternoon. And now Liam was running across a polished ballroom floor shouting, "Dad, Noah took my cupcake." Adrian turned before Mason did. The reaction was instant. Instinctive. For half a second, Adrian looked almost hopeful. Then Liam ran straight past him and wrapped both arms around Mason's leg. "I did not take it," Noah protested from several feet away. "You traded it to me for the chocolate one." That was before I remembered I wanted both. Mason looked down at Liam with solemn consideration. A tragic contract dispute. Ethan nearly smiled. Adrian did not. His eyes remained fixed on Mason's hand as it settled gently on Liam's shoulder. Something unreadable moved across his face. Loss, maybe, or the first real understanding of it. Ethan wished the sight gave him satisfaction. It did not. It mostly made him tired. "They call him Dad," Adrian said quietly. Ethan looked at him. "Yes." "How long?" "Long enough that they do not remember anything else." Adrian swallowed. "Did he adopt them?" Ethan's expression hardened slightly. "Do not turn this into paperwork. I am trying to understand." "Then understand this." Ethan kept his voice low. Mason was there when Noah had pneumonia at 2 years old and refused to sleep unless someone held his hand. He was there when Liam decided toilets were terrifying and somehow made that a 6-week family crisis. He learned how to braid costume capes, pack preschool lunches, and tell identical socks apart because apparently that became a necessary life skill. Adrian looked toward the boys again. "I could have done those things." Ethan felt the old anger rise, but this time it was quieter. "Older." "Yes." Adrian looked back at him. Ethan continued. "You could have." That hurt more than accusation. Adrian seemed to know it. Across the room, Mason crouched to straighten Noah's bow tie while Liam continued presenting his case regarding cupcake injustice. The scene was painfully ordinary. That was what made it powerful. No grand declarations. No dramatic rescue. Just a man remembering. Which child hated tight collars, and which one needed napkins before dessert? Adrian spoke again. "Do they know he is not their biological father?" Ethan's eyes narrowed. "They know Mason is their dad." "That is not what I asked. It is the answer that matters." Adrian went silent. Ethan could almost hear the machinery of his old world turning behind those gray-blue eyes, searching for a solution, a strategy, something measurable. But families were not companies. Love did not become valid because someone signed the correct document. Adrian finally asked, "What do you want me to do?" Ethan looked at him for a long moment. 5 years ago, he would have had 1,000 answers. "Come home. Call me. Choose us. Be there." Now the answer was much simpler. "Nothing tonight." Adrian looked startled. Ethan glanced toward the boys. "They came here for cupcakes and a charity auction, not to discover that their lives are more complicated than they thought." Adrian nodded slowly. "Can I see them again?" Ethan did not answer immediately. Mason looked across the ballroom and met his eyes. Calm, steady, present. Ethan turned back to Adrian. "That depends on whether you are asking because they are yours, or because you are finally ready to become someone they can trust." Adrian did not answer Ethan's question that night. Maybe there was no answer good enough. Maybe for once he understood that wanting something and deserving it were not the same thing. 3 days later, Ethan found out which lesson Adrian had chosen when a courier delivered an envelope to Mason's office. No flowers, no expensive gifts, no legal threat, just a handwritten note asking for 1 hour in a public place, with Ethan present, whenever Ethan believed the boys were ready. Mason read the note once and handed it back. "That is more reasonable than I expected." Ethan leaned against the edge of Mason's desk. "You sound disappointed." "A little. I prepared several excellent arguments in the shower." Ethan smiled despite himself. "You argue with people in the shower?" "Only imaginary billionaires." The humor faded when Ethan looked at the note again. 1 hour. It sounded harmless. That was how dangerous things usually started. "What do you think?" Ethan asked. Mason did not answer immediately. "I think they are your sons." "Our sons." Mason's face softened. Ethan repeated it because sometimes important truths deserve to be said twice. "Our sons." Mason nodded. "Then I think we tell them only what they need to know. No secrets that turn into shame later, but no adult history they are too young to carry." So on Saturday morning, they sat Noah and Liam at the kitchen table between half-finished pancakes and a bowl of strawberries. Ethan had rehearsed the conversation for 2 days. Liam ruined the script immediately by asking whether he was in trouble. No, Ethan said. Why would you be in trouble? Liam shrugged. This feels like the voice you use before you ask who put crayons in the dryer. Mason covered a smile with his coffee mug. Ethan took a breath. There is someone we want you to meet. Noah looked up carefully. The man from the party? Ethan's heart skipped. Yes. Noah had always noticed too much. His name is Adrian. Liam stabbed a strawberry with his fork. Is he your friend? Ethan glanced at Mason. There was no easy word for what Adrian was. He was someone important to me a long time ago. Noah's eyes narrowed in concentration. Before Dad. Before Dad. The kitchen became very quiet. Ethan reached across the table and rested his hand between the boys. Adrian is also connected to both of you. Liam looked confused. Noah did not. He stared at Ethan for several seconds before asking, like family. Ethan's throat tightened. Yes. Noah looked at Mason next. Are you still our dad? Mason set down his mug immediately. Always. No hesitation. No wounded pride. Just one word, steady enough to hold the entire room. Noah nodded, as if that settled the most important question. Liam frowned. So do we get 2 dads? Ethan almost laughed from sheer emotional exhaustion. Life is not always that simple. It should be, Liam said. 2 dads means twice the pancakes. Saturday afternoon, they met Adrian at a small botanical garden outside the city. Ethan had chosen it because there were open paths, benches, families, and enough space for everyone to breathe. Adrian was already waiting near the fountain. No suit, no assistant, no polished executive armor. Just dark jeans, a navy sweater, and an expression Ethan had never seen on him before. Nervous. Noah stopped beside Mason. Liam waved immediately. Adrian smiled, but the smile trembled at the edges. Hi, he said. I am Adrian. Liam looked him up and down. You know Papa. Adrian glanced at Ethan. I did. Noah studied Adrian's face with unnerving seriousness. Then he asked, Why do your eyes look like mine? Everything inside Adrian went still. Ethan almost stepped in, but Adrian lowered himself carefully so he was closer to Noah's height. He did not reach for him. He did not claim anything. Because, Adrian said slowly, I am part of where you came from. Noah considered that. Are you our real dad? Mason's hand tightened once around Ethan's fingers. Adrian's eyes lifted briefly toward them, then returned to Noah. Mason is your real dad, he said. I am your biological father. And if you ever want me to, I would like the chance to know you. Ethan felt the entire afternoon change with that answer. Not healed, not forgiven, just changed. Then Liam stepped forward and asked the only question that mattered to a 5-year-old. Do you like dinosaurs? Adrian blinked. Very much. Liam grinned. Okay, you can walk with us. And for the first time in 5 years, Adrian followed instead of leaving. The first meeting lasted 53 minutes. Ethan knew because he checked the time twice and then hated himself for checking. Adrian never pushed. He walked beside Noah and Liam through the greenhouse, listened to an extremely detailed explanation of dinosaur extinction, and allowed Liam to correct him on the difference between a brachiosaurus and an apatosaurus with the solemnity of a board meeting. Noah spoke less. He watched Adrian. That was somehow harder. When the hour ended, Adrian said goodbye without asking for more. Ethan almost respected him for it. Almost. 2 days later, Adrian asked Ethan to meet alone. Not at his office. Not at a restaurant. At a quiet coffee shop near the river, the kind of place where nobody cared who owned what company. Ethan arrived. First, Adrian came in carrying an old phone. Not his current one. Old. Scratched. Familiar. Ethan recognized it immediately. You kept that. Adrian sat across from him. I found it in storage. Ethan's stomach tightened. Why am I here? Adrian placed the phone on the table between them. Because I lied. The words were so direct that Ethan almost missed them. About what? Adrian looked at the screen but did not touch it. I told you I never heard your message. Ethan went completely still. The coffee shop continued around them. Cups clinked. Someone laughed near the window. A milk steamer hissed behind the counter. Ordinary sounds in a suddenly impossible moment. You heard it, Ethan said. Adrian closed his eyes briefly. Yes. Ethan stared at him. 5 years of questions rearranged themselves inside his head. When? The same day you left it. Ethan felt cold despite the warm cup between his hands. You knew there were two. Yes. You knew I was scared. Yes. Each answer was quiet. Each one landed heavier than the last. Ethan leaned back. And you still did nothing. Adrian's expression tightened. I told myself I needed another week. Then the board vote happened. Then my father had a health crisis. Then there was always another reason. There is always another reason when someone does not want to choose. Adrian looked down. I know that now. Ethan gave a short laugh with no humor in it. How convenient. Adrian did not defend himself. Instead, he unlocked the phone and opened an old voicemail file. Ethan saw the date. His own name. The duration. 48 seconds. His chest tightened so sharply he had to look away. Do not play it. Adrian stopped immediately. I was not going to. Then why bring it? Adrian swallowed. Because I needed you to know I am not going to hide behind a misunderstanding. Ethan looked at him again. Adrian continued. You called. You told me. I knew. Silence. Then Adrian said the part Ethan had not expected. I went to the hospital. Ethan's fingers tightened around the cup. What? The day they were born. Adrian's voice dropped. I found out where you were. I drove there. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat. You came. I sat in the parking lot for almost 3 hours. Ethan stared at him in disbelief. You were outside? Adrian nodded once. I saw Mason go in carrying 2 bags. I saw your sister arrive. I saw people bringing flowers. His mouth tightened, and I sat there thinking I had already failed so badly that walking inside would only make everything worse. Ethan's eyes burned, but his voice remained steady. So you left? Yes. No excuse. No correction. Just yes. Ethan looked out the window at the river moving under the gray afternoon sky. You were closer than I thought, he whispered. Adrian said nothing. Ethan turned back to him. That somehow makes it worse. Adrian's face fell. I know. Ethan shook his head. No. You know now? I knew then. He stood, leaving his untouched coffee on the table. Adrian did not stop him. Before Ethan walked away, he looked once at the old phone between them. 48 seconds. That was how long his voice had taken to tell Adrian there were 2 babies. 5 years was how long Adrian had taken to answer. Ethan did not tell Mason about the voicemail until the boys were asleep. The house had gone quiet except for the dishwasher humming in the kitchen and the occasional creak from upstairs. Mason stood at the counter drying a glass when Ethan said, he knew. Mason stopped. Ethan did not need to explain who. He heard the message. Mason set the glass down carefully. The day I left it. Ethan looked at the dark window over the sink. He knew there were 2 babies. He knew I was scared. He even came to the hospital the day they were born. Mason's expression changed. He came. He sat outside for 3 hours and left. Silence filled the kitchen. Ethan expected anger. Mason did not give him that. He only asked, how are you feeling? Ethan laughed softly. That question should be illegal. I can ask a worse one. Please do not. Mason came around the counter and stood beside him. Not touching. Waiting. Ethan stared at his wedding ring. I think I spent years believing there had to be some missing explanation. A lost message. A family emergency. Something that would make the story less stupid. And now I know the explanation was that he was afraid. Mason nodded slowly. Fear makes people do disappointing things. You are being very generous. No, Mason's voice stayed calm. I am being accurate. The next afternoon, Ethan received an email from Adrian's attorney. It was not threatening, but it still made his stomach tighten. Adrian wanted to establish financial support for Noah and Liam. Education accounts. Medical coverage. A trust for each boy. Ethan called him immediately. No. Adrian was quiet on the other end. You have not even read the full proposal. I read enough. Ethan, this is not about you. Good. Because I do not want anything from you. It is for them. Ethan stood in the living room while Noah and Liam built a cardboard spaceship 10 feet away. They already have college accounts. Then let me contribute. They have health insurance. Then let me cover what insurance does not. Ethan lowered his voice. You cannot purchase 5 years backward. Adrian went silent. That is not what I am trying to do. Then stop solving this like a chief executive officer. Ethan glanced toward the boys. They do not need a portfolio. They need consistency. I can give them both. Can you? The question sat between them. Adrian answered carefully. I want to try. Ethan closed his eyes. Then start smaller. How? Remember what Liam told you about dinosaurs. Adrian paused. He likes the Stegosaurus because he thinks the plates look like solar panels. Ethan opened his eyes. He had not expected Adrian to remember. And Noah? He likes space. Saturn, specifically. He thinks the rings make it look unfinished. Ethan said nothing for a moment. Good. Adrian's voice softened. Is that enough? For today. 2 days later, Adrian came to the house with no gifts. Ethan noticed that immediately. He sat at the dining table while Liam explained a plastic dinosaur collection and Noah showed him a book about the solar system. Adrian listened. Really listened. Ethan almost hated how natural it looked. Almost. Then Noah asked, "If you are our biological father, why were you not here before?" The room went completely still. Mason, standing near the kitchen doorway, did not move. Ethan's heart tightened. Adrian looked at Noah for several seconds. No corporate language appeared. No excuse arrived. "Because I was scared," Adrian said. Noah frowned. "Of us?" "No," Adrian's voice became quieter. "Of changing my life. Of losing things I thought were important." Noah looked down at the planet book. "Were they more important than us?" Adrian swallowed. "I thought they were." Ethan felt the truth settle painfully through the room. Noah looked back up. "And now?" Adrian's eyes shone, but his voice stayed steady. "Now I know I was wrong." Liam climbed onto his chair backward and studied Adrian. "Dad says being wrong means you have to fix it." Adrian glanced at Mason. Mason gave him nothing but a calm look. Adrian turned back to Liam. "Your dad is right." Noah closed the book. "How do you fix 5 years?" Adrian had no answer. For once, that was exactly the answer Ethan trusted. Mason waited until Adrian had gone before he started clearing the table. Noah and Liam were upstairs arguing over whose turn it was to choose the bedtime story, and Ethan stood in the kitchen listening to their voices drift through the ceiling. He answered them. Ethan said quietly. Mason stacked 2 cups beside the sink. "He did. I expected him to explain himself." "He probably expected that too." Ethan looked over. "You sound like you understand him." Mason gave a small shrug. Understanding someone is not the same as excusing them. Ethan leaned against the counter. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Say the reasonable thing when I am trying very hard to be unreasonable." Mason smiled. "It is one of my worst qualities." Ethan almost laughed, but the emotion caught somewhere deeper. He watched Mason rinse a plate, sleeves pushed to his elbows, moving through the kitchen with the ease of someone who knew where everything belonged. 5 years ago, Mason had been Adrian's rival. Now his coffee mug lived in the cabinet beside Ethan's. His shoes were by the front door. His name was on school forms, emergency contacts, birthday cards, and every ordinary piece of paper that quietly built a life. Ethan suddenly remembered the first time Mason had told him he loved him. It had been almost 2 years after the twins were born. No dramatic setting. No expensive dinner. Liam had fallen asleep with applesauce on his shirt. Noah was crying because a toy rocket had broken, and Ethan had been standing in the laundry room, holding one tiny sock, while considering whether adulthood was a practical joke. Mason had walked in, taken the sock from his hand, and said, "I love you." Ethan had stared at him. "That is terrible timing." "I know. There is laundry everywhere." "I noticed. One of the boys may have hidden crackers inside the couch." "Also noticed." Ethan had looked at him, exhausted and terrified. "Do not say things like that because you feel sorry for me." Mason's expression had gone still. "I do not feel sorry for you." "Then why?" Mason had looked toward the hallway where the boys were making enough noise for 6 children. "Because this is my favorite place to be." Ethan had not answered that night. Mason had not asked again. 3 months later, Ethan had been the one to reach across the breakfast table and say, "I think I love you too." The memory faded as Mason turned off the faucet. "You are staring at me," he said. "I am thinking. Dangerous." Ethan smiled. "Did you ever hate him?" Mason knew exactly who he meant. "Adrian." Ethan nodded. Mason dried his hands slowly. "Sometimes. Because of what he did to me." "Partly. What was the other part?" Mason looked at him for a long moment. "Because you loved him." Ethan went quiet. Mason continued before he could misunderstand. "I loved you before you ever noticed me. Long before the hospital. I never said anything because you were happy with him, or at least you thought you were." Ethan's chest tightened. "How long?" "A while." "That is not an answer." "You were wearing that awful green tie at Adrian's company dinner." Ethan stared. "That was 3 years before the twins." "I said a while." Ethan laughed softly in disbelief. "You never told me." "There was nothing to tell." You had chosen someone. Mason stepped closer, stopping just within reach. And when he left, I did not stay because I thought I could win. Ethan looked up at him. Mason's voice was calm. I stayed because you needed someone who would. Ethan felt his eyes sting. And now he is back. Yes. Does that scare you? Mason considered the question. Of course. Ethan blinked. He had expected confidence. Mason gave him truth instead. But I am not afraid because he is your past, Mason said. I am afraid because part of you still needs answers from it. Ethan lowered his gaze. Mason gently touched his wedding ring with one finger. Whatever answers you find, I want them to be yours. Not mine. Not his. Ethan looked at the man he had married and understood, maybe more clearly than ever, why he had married him. Adrian had once taught him how powerful love could feel. Mason had taught him what love looked like when it stayed. 3 weeks later, Noah got sick on a Thursday afternoon. It started with a headache after school and turned into a fever by dinner. Ethan had seen fevers before. 5 years of parenting twins had taught him the difference between inconvenient and concerning. This one crossed the line sometime after 8 o'clock, when Noah stopped arguing about bedtime and curled quietly against Mason on the couch. We are going in, Ethan said. Mason was already reaching for the car keys. Adrian arrived at the urgent care 20 minutes later because Liam had mentioned the appointment during their scheduled video call, and apparently Adrian had learned how to move faster when family was involved. He walked through the waiting room doors looking pale and too alert. What happened? Fever, Ethan said. The doctor thinks it is probably viral, but they are running tests. Adrian looked toward the exam room. Can I see him? Ethan nodded. Quietly. Noah was lying under a thin blanket, watching cartoons without interest. Adrian sat beside the bed and lowered his voice. Hey, astronaut. Noah looked over. Hi. Adrian's shoulders loosened slightly. Your dad says you are not feeling great. Noah glanced toward Mason, who was standing near the door with Liam half asleep against his side. Which dad? The question was innocent. The silence was not. Adrian recovered first. Mason. Noah nodded. He says I have to drink water even when it tastes weird. That sounds unfair. It is. For 10 minutes, everything was fine. Then the nurse returned and explained that Noah needed to stay a little longer for observation. Adrian immediately stood. I can have a private pediatric specialist here within the hour. Ethan looked at him. No, Adrian frowned. Ethan, this is our son. And he is being cared for. I know people who can get him into the best hospital in the state. Mason's voice stayed calm. He does not need another hospital right now. Adrian turned toward him. With respect, I am not asking you. The room changed. Ethan felt it before anyone spoke. Mason shifted Liam higher on his shoulder. And with respect, you are standing in a room with his parents. Adrian's expression hardened. I am his father. Biologically, Mason said. We are not doing this here, Ethan warned. Adrian looked back at Noah, then at Ethan. I am trying to protect him. By taking control? Ethan asked. By making sure he has everything available. He already does. Adrian's voice sharpened. You cannot expect me to stand here and do nothing. Ethan stepped between the two men before the argument could grow. Then do not do nothing. Sit with him. Hold his water cup. Read him the book in his backpack. Ask the nurse what he needs. But you do not get to turn fear into authority. Adrian stared at him. Ethan continued, quieter now. And neither of you gets to claim me. Neither of you gets to claim the boys like this is some contest. Mason looked away first, not ashamed, just listening. Adrian remained still. I did not mean it that way. Then learn another way. Ethan pointed toward the chair beside Noah. He needs calm. Can you give him that? Adrian looked at Noah, who was watching all of them with tired eyes. Something in Adrian's face softened immediately. He sat back down. Yes. Mason moved to the other side of the room and settled Liam into a chair. The tension slowly drained away. A few minutes later, Adrian opened Noah's space book and started reading in a voice so gentle it barely sounded like him. Ethan stood between the two men who had shaped different parts of his life and realized something important. Love was not measured by who felt the most. It was measured by who could put their feelings down when a child needed the room to be peaceful. Noah was discharged just after midnight with a mild viral infection, strict instructions to rest, and a deep personal resentment toward grape-flavored medicine. By the time they reached the parking lot, Liam was asleep against Mason's shoulder, and Noah was holding Ethan's hand with the loose grip of a child too tired to complain. Adrian followed several steps behind them. For once, he did not offer a car, a doctor, or a solution. He simply carried Noah's backpack. Ethan noticed. Mason noticed too. The next afternoon, after the boys were asleep on the couch under an unreasonable number of blankets, Adrian stopped by to return the space book Noah had left at urgent care. Ethan was upstairs, so Mason opened the door. For a moment, neither alpha spoke. "He is doing better," Mason said. "Fever is down." Adrian nodded. "Good." He held out the book. Mason took it, but Adrian did not leave. "Can I ask you something?" Mason leaned against the doorframe. "You usually do." Adrian almost smiled. "Almost. If I asked Ethan to come back to me, would you fight me?" Mason stared at him for a long second. "No." Adrian clearly had not expected that. "No. No." Mason stepped onto the porch and closed the door quietly behind him. "Because Ethan is not something either of us can win." Adrian looked away toward the street. "You know what I mean." "I do." "That is why the answer is no." Mason folded his arms. "If Ethan chose to leave me, I would hate it. I would probably spend several months being unbearable company. But I would not treat his decision like a hostile takeover." Adrian gave a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. "You really do hate the way I think." "Sometimes. And yet you married the man I loved." Mason's expression changed, not angry, just tired. "There. That sentence." Adrian looked at him. "What about it? You said the man you loved, not the man you left." Silence. Mason continued. "You keep talking like the story paused when you walked away." It did not. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. Ethan became a father. He learned how to survive on 3 hours of sleep. He changed jobs. He moved twice. He cried in grocery store parking lots and laughed at things that were not funny because he was too tired to know the difference. Mason's voice softened. "He became someone you do not fully know." Adrian looked toward the house. "And you do." "I know who he is now. That is what I am afraid of." Mason was quiet for a moment. "You should be." Adrian looked at him sharply. Mason continued before the words could sound cruel. "Not because I am better than you. Because if you want any place in this family, you cannot build it by reaching for the version of Ethan you remember." Adrian looked down at his hands. "I thought coming back would fix something." "It can." "You do not believe that." "I believe you can fix your relationship with the boys." Mason paused. "I believe you can apologize to Ethan without expecting forgiveness to turn into romance. And I believe you can stop confusing love with ownership." Adrian gave him a long look. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple." Mason glanced through the window toward the living room. "It is just not easy." The front door opened behind them. Ethan stood there, having clearly heard enough to understand the conversation. Adrian straightened. Mason stepped aside. Nobody rushed to explain. Ethan looked from one man to the other. "Everything all right?" Mason nodded. Adrian took a breath. "I think I am finally learning that question does not have to be about me." Ethan studied him carefully. Then, for the first time since Adrian returned, he smiled at him without bitterness. Small, cautious, real. Adrian looked almost stunned by it. Mason opened the door wider. "Noah wants someone to help finish his Saturn model." Adrian glanced toward the living room. "Is that an invitation?" Ethan answered this time. "It is a chance." Adrian nodded, and when he stepped inside, he did not walk ahead of them. Adrian did not ask Ethan to come back. That surprised Ethan more than any apology could have. Instead, he kept showing up. Saturday mornings became breakfast at the house. Wednesday evenings became video calls. Once a month, Adrian took Noah and Liam to the Science Museum with Ethan and Mason nearby, not because anyone distrusted him, but because trust was being built slowly, one ordinary day at a time. Adrian learned that Liam hated being rushed and that Noah asked difficult questions exactly when everyone was least prepared to answer them. He learned that 5-year-olds did not care about quarterly earnings, private drivers, or the fact that adults sometimes lowered their voices when they heard his last name. They cared whether he remembered the blue cup instead of the green one. They cared whether he promised to come to something and actually came. 3 months after the gala, Noah and Liam had their first soccer game of the spring. The field sat behind a neighborhood elementary school, surrounded by folding chairs, travel mugs, and parents pretending they understood youth soccer strategy. Ethan stood beside Mason near the sideline while Liam chased the ball in the wrong direction with extraordinary confidence. Noah was more interested in examining a patch of grass. Natural athletes, Mason said. Ethan nodded seriously. Clearly, he checked the parking lot without meaning to. Adrian had texted that morning. Important meeting. Running late. I will be there. Ethan had read the message twice and hated the old familiar feeling that followed. Waiting. He told himself it did not matter. Then he looked at Noah. Noah was checking the parking lot too. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The game was already halfway through when a black sedan stopped near the far end of the lot. Adrian got out before the driver had fully parked. No tie. Coat unbuttoned. Phone still in one hand. He hurried across the grass, then slowed when he saw them watching. His expression changed into something almost embarrassed. I am sorry, he said when he reached the sideline. The meeting ran over. Noah stared at him. Adrian looked worried. I know I said I would be here at the start. Noah pointed toward the field. You missed Liam kicking the ball into our own goal. Liam shouted from 20 yards away. It was strategic. Mason covered his mouth. Ethan failed completely and laughed. Adrian looked at Noah again. I'm sorry I missed it. Noah considered him with that same serious expression he had inherited from both biology and life. Then his face brightened. But you came. Adrian stopped breathing for a second. Ethan saw it. Mason saw it too. Yeah, Adrian said softly. I came. Noah nodded, apparently satisfied, and ran back toward his team. Adrian stood beside Ethan in silence. After a moment he said, I used to think if I could not do something perfectly, there was no point doing it at all. Ethan watched Liam attempt to negotiate with the referee over a throw-in. Children will cure you of that quickly. Adrian smiled. I am noticing. Mason handed Adrian an extra cup of coffee without comment. Adrian accepted it. Thanks. No rivalry. No tension. Just 3 adults standing beside a soccer field while 2 little boys created chaos under a bright Saturday sky. Later, after the game, Liam insisted everyone go for pancakes. Noah wanted waffles. The debate lasted all the way to the parking lot. Adrian walked beside them carrying both boys' jackets because neither child believed outerwear remained important after noon. Ethan fell a few steps behind with Mason. Mason reached for his hand. Ethan squeezed it. Ahead of them, Adrian listened while Noah explained why Saturn was still the best planet, even though Adrian had foolishly suggested Jupiter. Ethan watched the 4 of them and felt something inside him finally become quiet. Adrian had not gotten his old life back. That life no longer existed. Ethan had not forgotten what happened. Forgiveness was not forgetting. Mason had not lost his place. If anything, the shape of their family had become clearer. Blood had opened a door. Love decided who kept walking through it. 5 years ago, Adrian had chosen an empire because he thought power meant never losing. Now, with Liam calling his name from beside the car and Noah waving impatiently for him to hurry, Adrian seemed to understand something simpler. Sometimes love was not a grand promise, a perfect apology, or a second chance at the past. Sometimes it was arriving late, breathless and imperfect, and hearing a child say the words that mattered most. You came.